I'm TJ Morris, founder and CEO of Refuge Medical, and this is the Bleeding Prevention Kit. Today I'm going to show you what's inside of it and how to use it. This is a Generation 7 North American Rescue CAT tourniquet, combat application tourniquet. It is one of two windlass tourniquets that is recommended by the Committee on TCCC, Tactical Combat Casualty Care. It's been applied more than 19,000 times in the global war on terror. Old doctrine was life over limb. Do not apply a tourniquet. You could lose the limb. That is not true. We know this from 20 years of the global war on terror. Nobody has ever lost a limb due to the application of a tourniquet. They've lost the limb due to the wound that required the application of a tourniquet. These can be kept on for up to 2 hours without any permanent medical damage. The longest application of a CAT tourniquet was 19 hours from southern Afghanistan to Grafenberg, Germany. The way that this works is by constricting the artery against the bone structure. We use tourniquets in extremities, arms and legs, for the control of arterial bleeding. When you get this in the package, you're going to go ahead and open it up because we want to save time. We're going to open this up, discard the wrapper, discard the paperwork that comes with it. I'm going to show you how to stage this. Pull it open like so. Basic components. This stick is called a windlass. There's an inner band right here that's made of Kevlar. This is the band that constricts the artery. This is the time tab. These are the C-clamps. This is the buckle. This is the strap. We're going to take our red tab. We're going to pull it up and fold over approximately 1.5 inches, like so. The reason for that is I no longer require fine motor skills to be able to get a hold of this tab. We're going to pull approximately 6 to 8 inches of the strap out at the buckle, like so. We're going to put the windlass inside of the C-clamp. We're going to take the time tab. We're going to put it off at a 45-degree angle. Same concept. I don't need fine motor skills to be able to get a hold of this now. Then we're going to fold up at the bottom of the buckle, like so, and then fold down at the C-clamp. And that's a staged CAT tourniquet. What this does is the loop right here in the hook and loop now runs against this smooth nylon. It will not stick to itself. So if I need to deploy this, I can shake it out. I've got a loop. I'm ready to put it on. If I fold it, Velcro on Velcro, it will stick together and I've got a mess. So we don't stage our tourniquets that way. We fold it, the Velcro portion, the loop portion against the smooth nylon portion down so that it's staged and ready to go. I'm going to show you how to apply this. I'm going to use an orange CAT tourniquet for contrast so that you can see it. Same tourniquet, just a different color. The way this works, if we're applying this to ourselves, we're going to use what's called the rule of thumb. I'm going to take my thumb, put it on the C-clamp, like so. This way, no matter which arm or which leg, because tourniquets only go on extremities, no matter which arm or which leg I put it on, if my thumb is on the C-clamp, I will be oriented towards my center line, okay? So, in this case, I'm going to apply a tourniquet to my left arm to stop an arterial flow of blood. So, thumb on the C-clamp, slide it up, high and tight, not on the joint. It used to be taught 3 inches above the wound. Well, the problem with that doctrinally is that in some places we may not have 3 inches above the wound. It's important that we get this as high and tight as we can, because if you have a major laceration, our blood vessels, our arteries and our veins are under tension, kind of like a rubber band. And if they get cut, they can snap and pull backwards. So if we put it at the site of the wound, we may not constrict that bleeding vessel. So we want to go above the wound. We teach high and tight. There's a gap in between the shoulder and the bicep right here where this will sit perfectly. Pull this nice and tight, like so. Take this band, wrap it around the back, under tension. Stop just shy of the C-clamp. I want to have my windlass in my workspace, not on the back of my arm, not on the inside of my arm, in my workspace right here where I can get to it. Not over the joint, because the joint moves, and if this moves, it will come loose and I will lose the constriction of the bleeding vessel, which means I'm now bleeding out. Take the windlass, and I'm going to turn. It's going to hurt. You will not die. I like to tell people it's one turn past bad words. When you want to start saying bad words, it's probably tight enough. I'm going to stick the windlass inside the C-clamp like so. Take the tail, move it through the C-clamp, and put the time tab over the top. You'll note the vascularity in the back of my hand already. If you're trained in how to locate a pulse, you can take these two fingers right here. Don't use your thumb, it has its own pulse. These two fingers go behind the meaty part of your palm right here. There's a bone, roll off the bone into that soft spot, apply direct pressure, you should feel nothing. If you feel a pulse, that means the tourniquet is not tight enough. If you don't feel a pulse, you've got it tight enough for practice. In the real world, what we're looking for visually is a cue that the blood has stopped. Once the blood has stopped flowing, we know the tourniquet's tight enough. That is the basic application of a windlass style tourniquet, in this case the Generation 7 CAT tourniquet from North American Rescue. It is the premier windlass tourniquet on the market. We highly recommend it. It is one of 2 Committee on TCCC approved windlass tourniquets. Every time you use a tourniquet in training, you're going to restage it. The way that we restage it, undo this, pull the strap out of the buckle, and just pull. And that stretches the inner band. And again, this end goes through the buckle. We fold over 1.5 inches on the end, pull 6 to 8 inches out, fold it over, take our time tab, offset it at a 45, put our windlass inside the C-clamp, fold up at the buckle, down at the C-clamp, stage tourniquet ready to go. We apply tourniquets in a trauma medical setting. Trauma meaning critical bleeding, life-threatening bleeding. We do not remove tourniquets. We elevate to a higher level of care. We do not remove tourniquets. A doctor at the hospital will remove the tourniquet. All right, pressure bandages. Some are round or rolled pressure bandages. Some are flat pressure bandages. Doesn't matter, either one, whichever you have. These are essentially giant band-aids. It's an ace wrap with a large piece of gauze attached to it. Pressure bandages tend to go hand in hand with wound packing gauze or compressed gauze. Talking about wound packing, this is our wound. We have an entry wound here, simulated entry wound here, simulated exit wound here. The question is often, which wound do I pack? We're going to use our eyeballs. We're going to observe whichever one is bleeding more grievously, that's the one we're going to pack. If you have multiple packages of gauze, you can pack both wounds. But for the intent of this demonstration, we're going to pack the exit wound. You're going to take your gauze. You're going to find this little tear right here. Pull your gauze out, like so. And it is a block of gauze. You're going to smush it. That's a technical term. We're going to smush it back and forth until we get one end of the gauze out. You can, and I recommend, you put a knot at the end of the gauze. The way that this works is just like a tourniquet compresses the bleeding vessel. The gauze compresses the bleeding vessel. The idea is not to fill the hole, the wound, full of gauze to form a giant clot the size of your hand. The idea is to use the pressure of the gauze to press the bleeding vessel closed. Now, if you can't ascertain where the bleeding vessel is inside of the wound, packing the wound full of gauze will form a clot. But ideally, we're forming as much pressure as we can onto the bleeding vessel. So, the way that we do this, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to take the knot in my right hand and the package of gauze in my left. I'm going to take the knot, I'm going to drive it down to the bleeding vessel inside the wound while holding pressure on it. I'm going to pull 8 to 10 inches of gauze out, gather it up, take this thumb, press it into the wound, holding constant pressure inside the wound. Take my other thumb, press it into the wound. Now, a couple of important things here. The first is this wound is not one-dimensional. It blooms out, just like a gunshot in a block of ballistic gel does. It'll bloom out. So there's dimension to this. So you don't want to push just straight down. You want to be pushing in all directions. The other is I'm holding constant pressure with my fingers on the gauze. I'm not coming in and out, constant pressure. The last is, depending on the wound, you may or may not be able to get your thumbs in there. So if it's pinkies, it's pinkies. If it's pointer fingers, it's pointer fingers. Whatever you can to pack the wound. So holding pressure, pull out some more gauze, lay it over the wound, press in, press in, press in, press in, filling every void that I can inside the wound until it simply will not give anymore. I cannot get any more gauze inside of there. Then what I like to do is take the remainder of the gauze, lay it over the top of the wound, holding pressure, take my elbow or my knee if I need to. This frees up both of my hands. I get my pressure bandage, tear my pressure bandage open. Try again. There we go. Tear my pressure bandage open, get this guy out. And this is just a large Band-Aid. That's all it is. It's got intermittent Velcro throughout it. Big ace wrap with a 6x6 gauze pad on it. I'm going to take this, lay it over the top of the wound like so, holding pressure. You'll note here is just a large piece of Velcro. The first wrap of this bandage is just to get it to stick. I just want it to stick so it'll hold on. The following wraps, now I'm going to start to apply pressure, because the whole point is to get enough pressure on that bleeding vessel that it pinches the artery closed. So you can really pull it tight at this point. Now your patient is probably not going to be too happy with you. That's okay. We're saving their life. Lastly, we have a big piece of Velcro here. I'm going to put the Velcro on, not over the wound. Okay? The reason for that is the Velcro can lift the wound packing gauze away from the wound. So I want the Velcro offset 90 degrees or 180 degrees from the wound. Finally, there's these little plastic clips on the end. You can use that to secure the pressure bandage to itself like so. We use wound packing in our junctional areas, in our shoulders, in our neck, our hips, our pelvic girdle, our rear end, places where we can't compress a bleeding vessel with a tourniquet. So again, wound packing and pressure bandages in the shoulders, the neck, pelvic girdle, hips, your rear end. That's wound packing. These are gloves. May not seem like a very important thing, but we have a very basic rule when we're dealing with trauma medicine. If it's wet and not yours, don't touch it. You don't know what kind of diseases people may have. And while we want to intervene and save a life, buy somebody time for first responders to arrive, etc., we don't want to unnecessarily expose ourselves to biological threats. So you're going to take your gloves out of the wrapper like so, roll them out. These are size large nitrile gloves. They're blue. That will help you see blood. Blood also has a very distinct feel on the fingers. We're going to put these gloves on. Very basic. If you come in contact with blood or saliva or other bodily fluid when you're rendering aid, when the ambulance arrives, let them know, and they have decontaminating agents on the back of the ambulance and they can scrub you down, wash you up, and deal with that on site. These are gloves, very basic. They are a barrier in between you and the nasty world. When you remove your gloves after you're done, take these 2 fingers, pinch inside the glove, pull it most of the way off like so. Then take this, turn this inside out. Now they're inside out, wrap them up, and that goes in the trash. You don't have any of that on your hands. These are 7 1/4 inch EMT shears. The reason that we have good shears in our kits is because it can be vitally important to gain access to the wound. And so modesty is important, but not dying is more important. And if you have a patient that requires you remove their clothing in a hurry to be able to get to the source of a critical bleed, that's where these shears come in. They're medical shears. They're good, high quality medical shears. They're incredibly sharp, and they don't have pointy ends on them. That's so that you can run this up inside of a pant leg or inside of a shirt sleeve to expose the wound, because the more we can see, the more information I can gather, the better I can treat the casualty. EMT shears. This is an emergency blanket. It seems like a throwaway, but it's not. It's how we combat hypothermia. In a trauma setting, hypothermia is directly related to blood loss. For every 1 degree in drop of body temperature, the time that it takes for your body to form a clot doubles. 10 minutes with direct pressure at 98.6, 20 minutes at 97.6, 40 minutes at 96.6, 80 minutes at 95.6. And since we don't want our patient to bleed out, staying warm is incredibly important. We affectionately call these burrito blankets. If you've ever gotten a burrito from the gas station, does it stay warmer inside of the tin foil or outside of the tin foil? Inside the tin foil. And that's what this is for. It does not add heat to the casualty, but it does reflect the existing body heat back towards the casualty to keep them warm. Very basic. You pull it out, open it up, wrap the casualty in it, you're good to go. If you apply a tourniquet to the casualty, make sure you mark their forehead with a T to indicate that there is a tourniquet that first responders may not be able to see. Hypothermia is one corner of what's called the lethal triad, which is blood loss, acidosis, and hypothermia. And hypothermia, or the lack thereof, directly affects the survivability of the patient. So don't skimp out on this. If you have somebody who's dealing with critical blood loss, you absolutely want to wrap them up in an emergency blanket. This is a Sharpie. It's a permanent marker, indelible ink. This is used to mark the time tab on your tourniquet so that when higher help arrives, people with more training than us, when they show up and you hand off your casualty to them, they know what time the tourniquet went on. If you have the tourniquet covered up, if it's a cold situation where they're wearing winter clothing or they're wrapped in a Mylar blanket, a survival blanket, anything like that, we're going to take our Sharpie and we're going to put a T on the forehead so that EMS, paramedics, etc. know that there's a tourniquet on our patient. That's why we have the Sharpie. You can also use this if you have the opportunity to take a patient history. You can take a strip of tape, lay it on your leg or on your arm, and write down the patient's information using the Sharpie.